Have you ever felt completely powerless in the face of your own emotions? A careless remark from someone makes you angry. A minor failure leaves you sad and discouraged. You think it's only natural that everyone is like that. But perhaps you haven't realized you're falling into a trap that almost everyone gets caught in. Up to 99% of us let our minds operate on autopilot, like a reflex machine. Someone says something, and we instantly react. When circumstances turn against us, we immediately feel disappointed. Almost all of us live in a reactive state, simply responding to outside influences, unaware that this very habit is silently destroying our to live happily and successfully. What about the other 1%? They're not superhuman. They just know a secret. You can train your mind. Stoic philosophy advises that the mind is something we can train. Our greatest freedom as humans doesn't lie in controlling the world, but in choosing how we respond to it. In this video, I will show you how to stop being a victim of your emotions and become the leader of your mind. The Stoic way. 1. Thinking determines destiny. Have you ever wondered why, when faced with the same situation, each person can have a completely different perspective and emotional response? Morning traffic jams might leave you frustrated, but for someone else, it's an opportunity to listen to another chapter of an audiobook. Work pressure might drive you to complain, yet others use it as motivation to grow stronger. What makes that difference? The answer lies entirely in our own thinking. It's not circumstances that dictate your emotions, destiny, or happiness. It's how you think and how you respond to those circumstances. There's something nearly all of us have done: blaming everything around us when life doesn't go as planned. We say the traffic made us angry, work made us stressed, a breakup left us in despair. We let our emotions take over, allowing the outside world to shape our mood, and then we tell ourselves, everyone does that. But in reality, this trap only makes us weaker and more passive in the face of life's storms. There's a truth few are willing to face. If you keep living in a state of reaction, always waiting for circumstances to change so you can finally be happy, you will always be led by life, never truly in control of it. Reactive people are those who always find someone or something to blame. When difficulties arise, they come up with all sorts of reasons to complain, to blame fate, to blame others, and to blame their situation. I failed because no one helped me. I can't be happy because everything is against me. I'm angry because he spoke without tact. These words sound genuine, deeply human, but if you stick to this mindset, you'll never find real peace or lasting success. When it comes down to it, everyone has, at some point, been a victim of their own emotions and the habit of blaming. That's a natural reflex. But is everything natural necessarily good? If you let your mind naturally drift with external events, you'll end up lost at sea, always waiting for someone or something to rescue you. On the other hand, if you learn to pause and observe your own thoughts, you'll realize this: between any event and your emotional response, there is always a gap. And within that gap, you have the power to choose. You have the right to choose how you think. You can't control the traffic, but you can absolutely decide, I'm going to listen to a new podcast and make the most of this time to learn something. You can't change the way others treat you, but you can choose your response. Ignore it, smile, or calmly state your point of view. You can't prevent the pain of heartbreak, but you can choose to focus on what you can control: your emotions, your attitude, and the growth that comes after every storm. Many people confuse taking charge of their thoughts with lying to themselves or forcing themselves to be artificially positive. In reality, this is the skill of those who live mindfully and take responsibility for their lives. Being proactive doesn't mean you have to be happy all the time, nor does it mean denying your pain. It means having the courage to face the truth, but not letting that truth steal your freedom. As the famous Epictetus saying, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Happiness doesn't come from perfect circumstances, but from knowing how to control your mind in every circumstance. In truth, every problem in life starts with your thinking. Thoughts create emotions. Emotions drive actions. Repeated actions become habits, and habits shape destiny. Someone who constantly blames their situation will gradually become weak, always complaining and waiting for someone else to rescue them. But those who learn to control their thoughts become resilient, adaptable, and able to learn from every challenge. Try observing yourself for just one day. How many times do you let negative emotions take control? How often do you find yourself thinking, "If only," "What if," "Because"? And how many times do you actually pause, take a deep breath, and ask yourself, "What am I really thinking? Is there something I can do differently?" The moment you begin to question yourself, that's when you start to reclaim your own power. No one is born with the ability to completely control their thoughts and emotions. We all make mistakes. We all have moments of weakness. But the most important thing is that you don't give up. You begin to realize you can take charge of yourself, even just a little bit each day. It's a long journey, sometimes exhausting, but in return, you gain something priceless: true freedom, inner freedom. If you ever doubt the power of thought, look at those who have overcome the greatest adversity. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Auschwitz concentration camp, proved that even when you have nothing left, you still have the power to choose your attitude toward pain. Others may take everything away from you, but they can never take away the way you see yourself and this world. That is the foundation for each of us to decide our own fate, regardless of circumstances. You can continue living like 99% of people out there, letting circumstances and emotions lead you by the nose. Or you can choose to be proactive, to think differently, to respond differently. Sometimes, just a small shift in mindset is enough to completely change the course of your life. Being proactive isn't a privilege for the few. It's a choice for anyone courageous enough to look honestly at themselves. Remember, your destiny is not defined by what you've been through, but by how you think about it. You can't control everything, but there is always one thing you can control: yourself. Each day, focus on what you can do instead of what you can't. Train yourself to ask questions, observe your thoughts, and choose your responses consciously. You'll see, bit by bit, everything starts to change from your emotions and attitudes to your entire life. Finally, remind yourself of one simple but powerful truth. You have the right to choose. You are not a victim of your emotions. Be the one who leads your mind, not the one who is led by it. When you change the way you think, you are changing your own destiny. 2. The mistake of not taking responsibility for your emotions. Many people still believe that emotions are simply natural occurrences, beyond our control, shaped by the world and the people around us. When things don't go our way, we complain, we blame others, and we think the source of our sadness, anger, or disappointment always lies outside ourselves. Someone says something hurtful, and instantly we feel sad. The weather is gloomy, so we become discouraged. Life is unfair, and that makes us angry. It all feels like a script on repeat, where we are cast as powerless victims of our circumstances. But you see, when we react this way, we unknowingly hand over control of our minds to others or to the situation. People who react often say, "I'm unhappy because someone hurt me." That sounds reasonable, but hidden in those words is a surrender of our greatest freedom, the freedom to control our own attitude. When you let your mood depend on someone else, you are chaining yourself to negative emotions just because of an external trigger. And if you live this way every day, how can you ever be proactive? How can you truly be happy? Proactive people are different. They do not deny negative emotions, but they also do not let those feelings dictate their actions or their mood. A proactive person will say, "I feel hurt, but I choose not to let it control me." Just a simple shift in perspective is enough to transform a reactive person into someone who takes charge, opening a door to genuine inner freedom. Perhaps there is no better example of the power of mastering one's emotions than the story of Nelson Mandela. He endured nearly 30 years in prison, cut off from his family, surrounded by injustice and mistreatment, with nothing left to lose. Yet in those harsh circumstances, Mandela never allowed himself to become a victim of hatred or despair. Instead of letting anger and pain take over, he chose to respond in a positive way, focusing on a bigger goal: freedom, reconciliation, and a better future for his country. Mandela once said, "As I walked out the door toward the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison." The choice to respond, the choice to forgive, that is the greatest freedom, one that no one can ever take away from him. Why is there such a big difference between reactive people and proactive people? The answer lies in the fact that most of us grow up in a society that puts too much emphasis on the influence of external circumstances. We are taught how to react, not how to take charge. As children, when we cry, adults comfort us by blaming the table if we trip and fall. As we grow older and face difficulties, we hear people say, "It's fate, it's because of this person, it's the heavens." A long chain of excuses shapes the habit of living at the mercy of our surroundings, always in a passive state with our own emotions. But this, in fact, is the biggest trap in life. When you believe that your emotions are decided by others, you will never be truly happy. Because there will always be someone saying unkind things, there will always be bad days, and there will always be injustices you can't avoid. If you let these factors control your mind, you will forever be just a puppet on the stage of life, and the strings are held by someone else. The solution, in reality, is very clear. Take back control. Only when you accept responsibility for your emotions can you truly master them. Many people mistakenly think that taking responsibility means being tough or pretending negative emotions don't exist. But that's not true. Mastering your emotions doesn't mean denying them. It's about acknowledging, I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm disappointed. But then you ask yourself, what will I do with this emotion? Will I let it control me, or will I choose a different response? This is a journey of practice that demands patience and willpower. Just as your body needs training to become strong, your mind needs daily practice. Maybe you can't do it today, but every time you pause, recognize your emotion, and choose your response instead of reacting automatically, you take one more step toward inner freedom. Modern science also proves the power of this choice. The famous psychologist Pavlov showed that most human responses are conditioned reflexes. We get used to reacting unconsciously to stimuli. But what separates humans from animals is the ability to self-reflect and adjust our behavior. You are not a dog that salivates just because a bell rings. You are a human being with willpower, rationality, and the ability to choose proactively. Looking at it more broadly, many psychological theories mention the concept of free will. We are not entirely predetermined by genetics, family background, or society. Every individual can stand up, look back at themselves, and choose the direction for their own mind. The difference between a reactive person and a proactive person is whether they take responsibility for their emotions or keep searching for outside reasons and excuses to justify their mood. The truth is, there is a profound freedom that lies right there within you. No one can take away your right to choose how you live, how you think, or how you respond. Every day, you face hundreds of situations. Someone says something unpleasant. Work doesn't go smoothly. It rains. There's traffic. That's an unavoidable reality. But what you can do is not hand over the key to your happiness to anyone else. Keep it for yourself by choosing to take responsibility for your own emotions. True happiness begins the moment you dare to stand in front of the mirror, look at yourself, and say, I choose this attitude. I will not let anyone or any situation decide my state of mind. This isn't about being cold or indifferent. It's a strong inner power. When you achieve this, nothing can shake you anymore. So, if you want to train your mind to think the way you want, start by taking responsibility for your emotions day by day, moment by moment. That is the only path to inner freedom and lasting happiness. 3. The reason you have not mastered your emotions. We grow up surrounded by countless explanations for our own emotional states. Maybe you've heard somewhere or even told yourself, I have a short temper because it runs in the family. Both of my parents are like that. Sometimes you look back on your wounded childhood to find a reason for those moments of inner turmoil. On other days, you look around, feel frustrated, and blame an unfair society or a stressful environment for your constant anxiety and dissatisfaction. These thoughts aren't unfamiliar to any of us. There are 3 kinds of false destinies, invisible walls that people build around their minds to justify their emotions, their behavior, and even their failures to control themselves. People call them genetics, the past, and circumstances. Each one has its own convincing logic, a weight that's hard to deny, especially when these ideas have been repeated across generations, by family, by society, and by the stories we keep telling ourselves. First, the genetic destiny is the strongest armor many people put on. Just mention the word genetics, and suddenly, every effort to change seems meaningless. I was born hot-tempered. It's in my genes. It sounds scientific, reasonable, and it's so easy to accept. Then, every time you get angry, every time you lose your temper, you keep bringing up that reason like a lifebuoy for a fragile ego, for that helpless feeling within yourself. But if you pause for a moment, is it really true that everyone born to hot-tempered parents becomes just like them? Does sharing the same genes mean everyone has the same spirit, the same reactions to the world? History and reality prove otherwise. There are countless people who have risen above their genetic shadows to become the best versions of themselves. Because the real difference isn't in the genes, it's in how we choose to face and handle our emotions each day. Next is the psychological destiny, the long shadow of a wounded childhood. Many people grow up with sad memories and invisible scars on their souls. They believe that all their negative feelings today come from those old wounds. When sadness hits, they tell themselves, "I was hurt before. I can't be any stronger." Old pain is like a pebble dropped into water, sending endless ripples across the surface. But if childhood were everything, why is it that some people born into adversity can rise, stand tall, and be happier than ever? The reason is, they understand that the past only has power when we allow it. Pain is just a starting point, not the ending of one's life story. When we keep holding on to our wounds as an excuse for our present choices, we are locking ourselves inside the invisible cage of a false destiny. Then comes the circumstantial destiny. Every day, we witness injustice, the biases of society, economic hardship, and unpredictable challenges. It's easy to say, "I'm stressed, I'm frustrated because the world is unfair, because the environment is toxic." Millions have grown up feeling powerless, believing they're just victims of their circumstances. But think for a moment. In the same environment, some people collapse, while others rise and thrive. What creates that difference? It's not the circumstances. It's how each person chooses to respond and adapt. If we were nothing but products of our environment, no one would ever rise above their fate. These three false destinies, genetics, psychology, and circumstances, share a common thread. They make us believe our emotions are uncontrollable, predetermined, and shaped by forces beyond our reach. When we believe this, we give up. We react instead of acting, waiting for something out there to change so we can be happy instead of learning to master our inner world. This is the trap that 99% of us fall into, a mistaken belief in the limits of our own potential. In reality, humans are not pre-programmed machines that simply react. We are born with something far greater, the power to choose. Yes, genetics, the past, and circumstances all have an impact. But they are only part of the picture, the beginning. not the whole story. Within each of us, there is always a space of freedom where we can pause, observe our emotions and thoughts, and decide how we want to act. This is the strength of free will, the ability to rewrite the programming of our own minds. Many people believe that mastering emotions is something distant and unattainable, as difficult as changing one's nature. But in fact, every day is an opportunity to start. When you're angry, you can choose to pause and ask yourself, will this anger help me solve the problem? When sadness arrives, you can reflect, why am I feeling this way? Is there another way I could look at this? And when the world outside lets you down, try to find a small good thing in the situation, so you remember that you always have the right to choose how you see life. Don't be quick to believe in so-called false destiny. Don't use genetics, the past, or circumstances as excuses to stay stuck in negative emotions. People can learn to recognize, adjust, and even transform every emotional state within themselves. This is not a privilege reserved for a few, but an innate potential in everyone. You can start with small steps. Notice your emotions. Become aware of your automatic thoughts. Challenge the reasons you often use to justify your behavior. Each time you do, you are asserting your agency over your own mind. You are not a powerless victim of your emotions. You are not an unchangeable product of genetics, memories, or society. The greatest freedom we have is the freedom to choose how we respond to everything that happens in our lives. This is the doorway to mastering not only your emotions, but your entire life. And right now, you can begin to rewrite that story by your very own decisions. 4. The gap between the situation and the reaction. When an unexpected event happens, most of us tend to believe we have no choice but to react immediately. Someone says something that upsets you, and you instantly feel hurt, irritated, or even angry. Most people live in this state without realizing a simple truth. Between the event itself and our reaction, there is always a gap, a golden pause that often goes unnoticed or unknown. But it is in that silent moment where all the power to change your life resides. There's an amusing story about a man who constantly complained that everywhere he went, the world around him smelled terrible, as if someone had placed a piece of Limburger cheese, famous for its awful odor, in every corner. Day after day, he was grumpy and frustrated, wondering how anyone could stand such an atmosphere. Until one day, a friend pointed out that a small piece of cheese was actually stuck right under his own mustache. He hadn't realized that the problem wasn't the world, but the filter he was using to perceive it had been tainted. We are just like that. So often, what causes you pain is not the circumstances or the people around you, but the way your mind interprets those circumstances. It's the dirty lens of perception that makes everything seem negative and heavy. Yet, we keep thinking that if only our situation changed, we would finally be happy. That is the mistake 99% of people make. We forget that between what happens to us and how we respond, there is a space that belongs to you. If you can recognize and make use of that gap, it becomes the place where your true freedom lives. You have the power to choose. No matter how bad an event is, your reaction does not have to be a victim of instinct, habit, or your environment. This might sound simple, but it is one of life's greatest challenges. Millions of people go through their entire lives without ever realizing they possess this ability. People often blame circumstances, others, or fate. I lost my temper because he went too far. I'm disappointed because my job isn't what I expected. I can't control myself because that's just who I am. But if you pause for just a second and observe your mind, you will discover something remarkable. Emotions may arise, but you have the right to choose whether or not to let them control you. Here, psychologists have long discussed the theory of conditioned reflexes. You may have heard of Pavlov's story, where he trained dogs to salivate at the sound of a bell, even when there was no food present. In many ways, people live like that too. An event happens and we automatically respond, as if we are programmed machines. But unlike animals, you have a great gift, the awareness of yourself. You can pause, observe the situation, and choose your response instead of being led by instinct alone. In life, there are times when everything feels unfair and everyone around you seems to let you down. But remember the story of the Limburger cheese. Sometimes, what really needs to change isn't the world. It's your own perspective and state of mind. You have the power to put down that stinky cheese on your upper lip and realize the world isn't as bad as you think. You can clean your perceptual lens to see everything with greater clarity and positivity. This initiative is an art form. It doesn't happen overnight, and you won't master it just by reading a book or listening to a video. But you can start with the smallest steps. Pause before you react and ask yourself, will this reaction make me better? Is this really how I want to feel? That's the very first step to reclaiming control over your own mind. You'll also realize that when you learn to master the gap between an event and your response, you are no longer a victim of your circumstances. No matter how bad the world may seem, you won't be haunted by it because your mind has been cleansed. No one and nothing can dictate your emotional state except you. That is the greatest freedom anyone can have. Every day, try to practice this art. When someone upsets you, don't react immediately. Take a deep breath. Let that space open up, and you'll see everything feels much lighter. When you encounter failure, instead of torturing yourself or giving up, allow that gap between the event and your reaction to give you the chance to learn, to calm down, to grow. Many people believe that controlling emotions is impossible, that it's all instinct or fate. But the truth is, instinct only determines the first step. The final choice is always yours. That space is yours alone. No one can take it from you or fill it for you. If you don't take responsibility for it, no one can help you. But if you start to practice day by day, you'll see this proactive ability grow stronger and stronger. You'll feel the freedom and maturity you've always wanted. Remember, no one can force you to react like a machine. The outside world will always be unpredictable and full of surprises. But you have the right to choose how to respond to anything that happens. That is the real strength of a mature human being. And the most wonderful thing is this: the space between stimulus and response always belongs to you and you alone. 5. Successful thinking. Success, at its deepest level, is not the result of luck, background, or a fortunate chain of events. If you think that successful people move through life without stumbling, think again. What truly separates those who rise above every circumstance from those who collapse in the face of adversity is not the number of challenges life throws at them, but how they confront hardship and the attitude they choose when facing setbacks. In life, no one can avoid moments of being pushed around, misunderstood, or even enduring cruel injustice. These are things almost impossible to control, and no one wishes for them. Yet there is one truth that many tend to forget. We do not have to be overwhelmed by such circumstances. Those who are truly successful understand that in those moments when life tests them, they are given the greatest power of all, the power to decide how they will respond. Think of the image of Jesus, who endured the harshest injustices, but never allowed that injustice to turn him into a victim. He did not choose resentment. He did not react with anger or sorrow, no matter how brutal the situation was. On the contrary, he kept his mind calm and open, continuing to offer forgiveness even when suffering his deepest wounds. This is what successful people do. They do not allow ugly circumstances to tarnish the goodness within. They realize that if they let external events control their emotions, they become slaves to circumstance. But by choosing their perspective and their feelings, they turn every challenge into a chance to grow, and no one but themselves can decide their own happiness or suffering. The power of proactive thinking does not lie in thinking positively in a superficial way. It is about training your mind not to turn yourself into a victim of passing emotions. In every situation, you have the right to choose how you think about the problem. Successful people know that every moment is a small test. Will I react the same as before, sad, angry, blaming others? Or will I try a different approach, one that is more proactive and calm? It is these small, repeated choices each day that lay the foundation for lasting success. The famous quote by philosopher Marcus Aurelius, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. Hidden in this quote is the greatest freedom a person can achieve. When you understand that you have the right to control your mind, you are no longer a victim of external circumstances. What happens on the outside may be imperfect, may even be cruel, but you can choose not to let it break your inner peace. That is strength, a quiet but resilient power possessed only by those who dare to take responsibility for their own emotions. Successful people have been hurt. They have faced disappointment and lost faith in others and the world hundreds of times. But they never let those wounds become an excuse to deny their own value, nor do they use the past to justify negative reactions in the present. They understand this truth. No one can make you suffer unless you allow it. If someone hurts you, the only thing they can do is act or speak. Your emotions belong to you, and only you can decide whether to hold on to the pain or let it go. Many people live in a reactive state where every feeling is dictated by their surroundings. They wake up, and if the weather is bad, their mood turns gloomy. If someone says something harsh, they immediately get angry or withdraw into sadness. That's how 99% of us live, letting outside events dictate our moods, thoughts, and ultimately our lives. But true success never comes to those who live on autopilot. It only comes to those who dare to sit with themselves and ask, What do I really want to think and feel in this situation? Can I choose a different response? A success mindset begins by accepting that you have the right to control your own thoughts, and by training that control like a muscle. No one is born strong, and no one is always calm in the face of adversity. But every time you choose to pause, observe your reactions, and try a new perspective, you're building a steadier mind and a more open heart. Success, therefore, doesn't come from luck. It is the result of thousands of moments spent practicing self-control. Think of the people you consider successful. They may have failed more times than you can imagine. They, too, have been criticized and have gone through seemingly hopeless moments. But they don't let those negative experiences rule their minds. They take the lessons, then move forward with greater maturity. The biggest difference between successful people and those who fail isn't in the number of times they fall, but in their ability to get up, see things with greater clarity, and refuse to let the past dictate their future. True success comes when you take responsibility for your own emotions and thoughts. It's when you realize you can choose forgiveness over resentment, learning over complaint, action over giving up. No one can make you suffer unless you allow it. Once you believe this, you hold the key to every door in your life. And that is the only path to true freedom, happiness, and lasting success. You are not a victim of your emotions. You are the creator of your emotions. In every moment, you have the power to choose your reaction, to choose your mood, to choose your attitude towards life. Start with one simple question. This happened. How will I respond so I don't lose myself? That's the true spirit of Stoicism. And that's the first step in training your mind to think the way you want. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share to spread these positive values. Remember to turn on notifications so you won't miss any of our next videos. Right now, you can check out the recommended videos at the end of the screen to continue your journey of training your mind with me.